The rain fell gray and cold over Neo-Seoul. It was always gray now. 300 years after the Great War, the sky still remembered the fires that had burned across Earth. Park Do-hyun pulled his coat tighter and walked faster through the undercity market. He walked this same path every morning, past the noodle vendors who shouted prices into the wet air, past the old men playing cards under plastic sheets, past the beggars who sat against broken walls with empty eyes and empty hands. Do-hyun worked for the Tehran Reconstruction Authority. It was not an exciting job. He moved supplies from one place to another. He filled out forms. He attended meetings where people talked about rebuilding things that had been broken for centuries. It was honest work, and it paid enough for a small apartment and warm food. He did not think about the past very much. Nobody did, really. The past was too heavy to carry every day. The market was busy this morning. Do-hyun squeezed between two food carts and almost stepped on a sleeping dog. He checked his watch. He was going to be late again. That was when he saw her. She was sitting under what remained of a transit shelter. The roof had collapsed long ago, but two walls still stood, creating a small corner where someone could hide from the rain. Most beggars avoided this spot because the ground was always wet and cold. But she sat there anyway. A woman wrapped in thermal scraps, the cheap silver blankets that emergency services handed out during winter storms. Her hair was long and dirty, hanging over her face like a curtain. Her hands were thin, almost skeletal, resting on her knees. Do-hyun had walked past 1,000 beggars. He had learned to look away, to keep moving, to tell himself that he could not help everyone. It was easier that way, but something made him stop. He did not know what it was at first. Maybe it was how still she sat. The other beggars moved around, adjusting their positions, scratching themselves, looking up at people who passed. This woman was perfectly motionless, like a statue, like something pretending to be human. He stood there in the rain, staring at her, feeling foolish. People pushed past him. Someone cursed at him to move. Then she opened her eyes. Do-hyun's heart stopped. He knew those eyes. Every human alive knew those eyes. They had been burned into humanity's memory for 800 years. Gold and amber, with pupils that were not round, but shaped like vertical slits. Eyes that glowed faintly, even in the gray morning light. Eyes that had watched billions of humans live and die as slaves. Dragon eyes. The woman looked at him. There was no fear in her gaze. No anger. Only a deep, endless tiredness that seemed older than the stars. Do-hyun could not move. His body had forgotten how. His mind was screaming at him to run, to call for help, to do something. But he just stood there, frozen, as the rain soaked through his coat. He knew who she was. He had seen her face in history books and old broadcasts, in the nightmares that humanity had passed down for generations. Solara, the Celestial, Flame, one of the 7 dragons who had ruled the eternal dominion. She had governed the Sol system for 400 years. Under her rule, humans were property, cattle, tools to be used and thrown away. And now she was sitting in the gutter of a human city, wrapped in garbage, starving. You. The word came out as a whisper. Do-hyun's voice did not work properly. You are. Solara closed her eyes again. She did not speak. She did not move. She simply sat there as if he was not worth responding to. The dismissal made something hot and angry rise in Do-hyun's chest. How dare she? How dare she sit there like she was the victim? After everything her kind had done? Answer me. He stepped closer, his hand shaking. I know what you are. I know who you are. The woman opened her eyes again. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was like dry leaves scraping across stone. Then you know I cannot hurt you. Not anymore. Do-hyun stared at her. Up close, he could see how thin she was. Her cheekbones pressed against her skin. Her lips were cracked and pale. She looked like she had not eaten in weeks. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "Why are you on Earth? Your kind was exiled. You were supposed to be dead." Solara almost smiled. It was a terrible smile, empty of any joy. "I am supposed to be many things," she said. "Dead is one of them. But dragons do not die easily, human. Even when we wish to." People were starting to stare. Do-hyun realized he was making a scene. He looked around quickly, but nobody seemed to recognize the beggar woman for what she really was. To them, she was just another piece of human garbage on the street. They could not see past the dirt and the rags to the monster underneath. "I should call security," Do-hyun said. His voice was steadier now, but his heart was still pounding. "They would kill you. They would put your head on a spike in Liberation Square." "Yes," Solara agreed. "They would." She did not sound afraid. She did not sound anything at all. Do-hyun waited for her to beg, to plead for her life, to try to manipulate him with lies or promises. That was what dragons did. They twisted words like weapons. They made you believe things that were not true. But Solara just sat there, looking at him with those ancient golden eyes, waiting. "Why aren't you afraid?" he asked. "Because I have been waiting to die for 200 years, she said. "You would be doing me a kindness." Do-hyun did not know what to say to that. He stood in the rain, looking down at the creature who had enslaved his ancestors, and felt something he did not expect. Confusion. He turned and walked away. He did not call security. He did not tell anyone what he had seen. He went to work, sat at his desk, and stared at his screen without seeing anything on it. That night he could not sleep. He lay in his bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about those golden eyes. He thought about his great-grandmother, who had died in the lunar processing camps. He thought about the genetic markers he carried, the modifications that the dragons had made to his bloodline to make humans better workers. He thought about 800 years of slavery and suffering and death. And he thought about a dragon sitting in the rain, waiting for someone to kill her. The next morning, Do-hyun went to the public archives. He searched through old files and forbidden records. He learned what had happened to the dragons after. Humanity won the Liberation War. The surviving dragons had been stripped of their power. Cores the crystalline hearts that gave them their strength and immortality. Without them, dragons became mortal, weak, vulnerable. They were exiled to the edges of the galaxy, forbidden from ever returning to human space. Most of them had been hunted down and killed anyway. Angry survivors who could not let go of their hate. Do-hyun understood that hate. He felt it himself, burning in his chest like a coal that would never go cold. But Solara had survived. She had come back to Earth, to the world she had once ruled, and she had been hiding here for 2 centuries. The records said she was dead. Officially, she did not exist. Do-hyun closed the archive files and sat alone in the dark room. He did not know what to do with what he had learned. He did not know why he cared. But he knew one thing for certain. Tomorrow morning, he would walk past the transit shelter again. And this time, he did not think he would be able to keep walking. Do-hyun told himself he was just curious. He told himself he wanted answers. He told himself 100 different lies as he walked through the undercity market the next morning, carrying a small bag of food he had bought from a street vendor. The transit shelter was still there. Solara was still there. She had not moved at all. For a moment, Do-hyun wondered if she was dead. Then he saw her chest rise and fall, slowly, weakly. He stood at the edge of the shelter, looking down at her. In the pale morning light, she looked even worse than before. Her skin had a grayish color that was not healthy. Her breathing was shallow. "I brought food," he said. The words felt stupid coming out of his mouth. He was bringing food to a dragon. His ancestors would be screaming at him from their graves. Solara opened her eyes. She looked at the bag in his hand, then at his face. She did not reach for the food. "Why?" she asked. Do-hyun did not have a good answer. "I don't know." He set the bag down next to her and stepped back. Solara looked at it for a long time. Then, slowly, she reached out with trembling hands and opened it. Inside was rice, vegetables, and some dried meat. Simple food. Cheap food. But Solara stared at it like it was made of gold. She ate slowly. Her hands shook so badly that she dropped pieces of rice on the ground. She did not seem to notice. She ate until the food was gone, then sat there with the empty bag in her hands, breathing hard from the effort. Do-hyun watched her. He had expected to feel satisfied, watching a dragon struggle to eat like a beggar. He had expected to feel powerful. Instead, he felt sick. "Why are you doing this?" Solara asked again. Her voice was stronger now, but still rough. "You know what I am. You know what I did." "I know," Do-hyun said. His hands curled into fists at his sides. "My great-grandmother died in the lunar processing camps. Camp 17. The one you personally ordered built." Solara did not look away. "I remember Camp 17. I remember all the camps. Then you remember the children. You separated them from their parents. You used them for experiments. Yes, you bred humans like animals. My family has genetic markers from your programs. My eyes are the color they are because your scientists designed them that way." "Yes." Do-hyun stepped closer. His voice was shaking now. "Say you're sorry." Solara met his eyes. Those golden alien eyes that had watched his ancestors suffer and die. "Would that help you?" she asked. "Would an apology erase what I did? Would it bring back your great-grandmother? Would it undo 800 years of slavery?" "No," Do-hyun admitted. "But you should say it anyway." Solara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, heavier, older. "I remember every face," she said. "Every single human who died under my rule. Dragons do not forget. Our minds are not like yours. We remember everything, perfectly, forever. I remember the names of the children in Camp 17. I remember the sounds they made when they were taken from their mothers. I remember believing that it was right, that humans were lesser creatures who needed to be guided and shaped." She paused. The silence stretched out like a wound. "I remember the moment I realized I was wrong," she continued. "It was during the Liberation War. I watched a human woman hold a bomb against her own chest and run toward my soldiers. She was smiling. She knew she was going to die, and she was smiling because she was taking my soldiers with her. And I understood, finally, that you were never cattle. You were never lesser. You were always capable of everything we were capable of. We just never let you show it." Do-hyun did not know what to say. He had expected her to deny everything, to make excuses, to blame others. That was what the history book said dragons did. "If you understand that," he said slowly, "then why are you here? Why come back to Earth?" Solara closed her eyes. "Because this is where I sinned the most. I wanted to die here, among the people I hurt. It seemed fitting. You've been here for 200 years. Yes, why hasn't anyone killed you?" Solara opened her eyes again. Something that might have been a smile crossed her face, but it was empty and sad. "Many have tried. In the beginning, I did not fight back. I let them hurt me, but a dragon's body is strong, even without a power core. I healed. I survived. Eventually, I learned to hide better, to look like any other piece of human garbage on the streets. She held up her thin hands. The hunger helps. The weaker I become, the more human I look. A few more years without food, and I might finally be weak enough to die. Do-hyun stared at her. You're starving yourself on purpose. It is the only way. Nothing else works. He should have felt happy. Here was a dragon, one of the monsters who had enslaved humanity, slowly dying in misery. This was justice. This was what she deserved. But Do-hyun really looked at her, and saw something he did not expect. He saw a creature who was tired. Not the kind of tired you feel after a long day of work. A deeper tiredness. The kind that settled into your bones and never left. The tiredness of someone who had carried a weight for so long that they had forgotten what it felt like to stand straight. You're not asking for forgiveness, he said. No, Solara agreed. I am not. You're just waiting to die. Yes. Do-hyun sat down on the wet ground across from her. He did not know why he did it. His clothes would be ruined. His boss would ask questions. Tell me about the camps, he said. Tell me what you remember. Solara looked at him for a long moment. Then she began to speak. She told him about Camp 17, about the experiments designed to make humans more efficient workers, about the breeding programs that had shaped human bloodlines for generations, about the children who were taken and the parents who were left behind. She told him about the other camps, too. Hundreds of them, across Earth and the Moon and Mars. Millions of humans processed through her systems. Lives measured in productivity units. Deaths recorded in efficiency reports. She told him everything, and she did not try to make herself sound better. She did not make excuses. She simply spoke, and Do-hyun listened, and the rain kept falling around them. By the time she finished, hours had passed. Do-hyun had missed work. He did not care. I hate you, he said. His voice was calm, quiet. I will probably hate you forever. Good, Solara said. You should. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. A security patrol was making its rounds through the Undercity. Do-hyun heard the heavy footsteps of armored officers, the hum of their scanners. If they scanned Solara, they would know what she was. Her biology was different enough that any basic medical scan would identify her as non-human. And then they would kill her. Do-hyun looked at her. She looked back at him. She did not seem afraid. She seemed almost hopeful. Hide behind me, Do-hyun said. Solara blinked. What? The patrol. Hide behind me. Pull your blanket over your head. Don't move. Why would you? I don't know. Do-hyun grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the corner of the shelter. Just do it. He did not understand what he was doing. He was protecting a dragon. A monster. His great-grandmother's murderer. This was treason. This was madness. But he could not watch her die. Not yet. Not until he understood why he could not stop thinking about those golden eyes. The patrol passed. Their scanners swept the area, but Do-hyun's body blocked Solara from view. The officers moved on, looking for criminals and contraband, never suspecting what was hidden in the ruins of the old transit shelter. When they were gone, Do-hyun stepped back. His hands were shaking. Solara stared at him like she had never seen a human before. Why did you do that? She whispered. Do-hyun did not answer. He turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the rain. He did not sleep that night either. 1 week passed. Do-hyun kept bringing food to the transit shelter. He did not tell anyone. He did not explain it to himself. He just did it. On the 8th day, he made a decision that surprised even him. He brought Solara to his apartment. She was too weak to walk far. He half-carried her through the back streets, avoiding the main roads where cameras watched everything. She weighed almost nothing. It was like carrying a bundle of sticks wrapped in cloth. His apartment was small. One room with a bed, a desk, and a tiny kitchen area. The walls were bare, except for a single photograph, his grandmother, holding a baby that would grow up to be his mother. It was the only picture that had survived the camps. Solara sat on the floor in the corner, wrapped in her thermal blankets. She looked around the room with those strange golden eyes, taking in every detail. "This is where you live," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, it is very small." Do-hyun almost laughed. Not everyone had palaces. Solara was quiet for a moment. "I had a palace once. On the moon. It was made of crystal and light. I could see Earth from every window. I used to watch the planet turn and think about all the humans working below. All that productivity. All that potential being properly directed." Her voice was flat, empty, like she was describing something that had happened to someone else. "Why are you telling me this?" Do-hyun asked. "Because you asked me to tell you about the camps. You wanted to understand what I was, what I thought." She looked at him. "Do you still want to understand?" Do-hyun sat down on his bed, facing her. "Yes, then I need to tell you something else. Something your history books do not include." "What?" Solara took a slow breath. Her hands, resting on her knees, were trembling slightly. "I need to tell you how your people won the war." Do-hyun frowned. He knew how the war was won. Every human child learned that story. The brave uprising. The sacrifice of millions. The final battle where humanity's fleets destroyed the Dragon command ship and broke the eternal dominion forever. "I know how the war was won," he said. "No." Solara shook her head slowly. "You know the story your people chose to remember. You do not know the truth." Something cold settled in Do-hyun's stomach. "What do you mean?" Solara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was very soft. "The Liberation War was not won through courage alone. Your people were brave, yes. But bravery is not enough against dragons. We had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Our technology was beyond anything you could imagine. Our soldiers were faster, stronger, harder to kill. One dragon warrior was worth 1,000 humans in battle." She paused. "So your people found other ways to fight. What ways?" "They reverse-engineered our bioweapons. The plagues we used to control populations. Your scientists improved them, made them stronger, made them targeted." She met his eyes. "Your people created diseases that only affected Dominion species. Viruses that melted our soldiers from the inside out. Plagues that sterilized entire generations." Do-hyun felt the blood drain from his face. That is not what your history books say." "I know, but I was there. I saw what your weapons did to my people." Solara's voice cracked. "I saw dragons dissolving in their armor. I saw our children born dead because your viruses had reached our breeding worlds. I saw things that still make me sick to remember." "You're lying." "I have no reason to lie." "Not anymore." Do-hyun stood up. He paced across the small room, his hands running through his hair. "No, we were the victims. We were the slaves. We couldn't have. You did." Solara's voice was gentle now, almost kind. "And there was more. Psychological warfare. Your people developed broadcasts that drove our soldiers mad. Sound frequencies that made us see things that were not there. Chemicals that made us turn on each other." She pulled something from inside her thermal blanket. A small data chip, old and battered. "I kept records, evidence. I do not know why. Perhaps I thought someone would want to know the truth someday." She held out the chip. "This contains images, videos, documents, proof of what your people did to win their freedom." Do-hyun stared at the chip, He did not want to take it. He did not want to know, but he took it anyway. He plugged it into his desk terminal and watched the files load. And then he watched the truth unfold. He saw human commanders ordering attacks on civilian worlds. Not military targets. Civilian worlds. Places where dragons lived with their families. Their children. He saw videos of dragon prisoners being experimented on. Their bodies cut open while they were still alive. Their screens recorded for analysis. He saw reports of human fleets burning entire planets. Not because they were strategic targets. Because killing civilians would break dragon morale. He saw humanity become monsters. Why are you showing me this? Do-hyung whispered. His eyes were wet. He did not remember starting to cry. Because you needed to see it, Solara said. You needed to understand that the war was not a battle between good and evil. It was a battle between two kinds of evil. And your people were willing to be more evil than mine. Do-hyun turned away from the screen. He could not look anymore. We were slaves, he said. We were fighting for our freedom. Yes, and that is why you won. Because you were willing to do anything. To sacrifice anything. To become anything. Solara's voice was heavy with something that might have been respect. Dragons had ruled for 10,000 years. We had forgotten what it meant to fight for survival. We had forgotten what it meant to be desperate. But your people never forgot. They could never afford to forget. Do-hyun sat down on the floor, his back against the wall. He felt hollow inside. Why did you surrender? He asked. The records say you could have fought longer. You still had armies. You still had ships. Solara closed her eyes. Because I saw what humanity would become if the war continued. You were already becoming something terrible. Something like us. If we kept fighting, you would have turned into the very thing you were trying to destroy. And then, she opened her eyes. Then what would have been the point? You would have been free, yes. But you would have been free to become worse than we ever were. So you gave up. I chose exile over escalation. I thought if I stopped fighting, maybe your people would stop too. Maybe they would remember who they wanted to be, instead of who they had to be to survive. The room was quiet. Outside, the sounds of the city continued. People walking, talking, living their lives. They had no idea what Do-hyun was learning. Do they know? He asked. The people out there. Do they know what we did? Some of them? The leaders. The generals. The historians who keep the secret files. Solara shrugged weakly. But most people only know the story they were told. The story of brave humans fighting evil dragons. It is a good story. It makes people feel proud. Do-hyun thought about his grandmother. About the photograph on his wall. About the camps and the experiments and all the suffering his people had endured. And then he thought about the dragon children who had died screaming from human. Plagues, we're not better than you, he said. We're the same. No. Solara shook her head. You are not the same. You have something we never had. What? The ability to change. Dragons are old, ancient. We were what we were for 10,000 years. We could not imagine being anything different. But humans, she looked at him with something like wonder in her golden eyes. Humans can change. You change all the time. You change who you are, what you believe, what you are willing to do. It is terrifying, but it is also beautiful. Someone knocked on the door. Do-hyun froze. No one ever knocked on his door. He lived alone. He had no friends close enough to visit. Do-hyun? A woman's voice. It's Gina, from work. We need to talk. Yoon-Gina, his colleague. The security liaison. Do-hyun looked at Solara. She looked back at him. Hide, he whispered. In the closet. Don't make a sound. He helped her into the small closet and closed the door. Then he took a deep breath and opened the front door. Gina stood in the hallway. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. She was not smiling. "Can I come in?" she asked. "I'm busy. I know." She pushed past him into the apartment. "I know you've been accessing restricted files. I know you've been missing work. I know you've been visiting the Undercity every morning." She turned to face him. "What's going on, Do-hyun?" Do-hyun tried to keep his face calm. "Nothing. I've just been doing research. Research on Dragon Exile protocols?" Gina raised an eyebrow. "That's classified information. Way above your clearance level. I was curious." "Curious about what?" Do-hyun said nothing. Gina stared at him for a long moment. Then she sighed. "I'm going to report this to Terran Security," she said. "I have to. It's my job." She paused at the door. "Whatever you're involved in, Do-hyun, it's going to come out. It always does." She left. Do-hyun stood alone in his apartment, his heart pounding. In the closet, he could hear Solara breathing. Everything was about to fall apart. Do-hyun had 3 days before Terran Security came for him. He spent those 3 days thinking, pacing his small apartment, watching Solara grow weaker in the corner, trying to understand what he should do. "You should give me to them," Solara said on the second night. She was lying on the floor now, too weak to sit up. "It is the right thing to do. I am a war criminal. I deserve whatever punishment they give me." "I know you do," Do-hyun said. "Then, why are you still protecting me?" He did not have an answer. On the third morning, he woke up to the sound of sirens. Through his window, he could see security vehicles surrounding the building. Armed officers were moving into position. Drones hovered overhead, their cameras watching everything. They were here. Do-hyun walked to the window and looked down at the street. There were dozens of officers, maybe 100, all for one dying dragon and one confused human. "They brought a lot of guns," he said. Solara made a sound that might have been a laugh. "They are afraid of me. Even now. Even like this." She raised her skeletal hand. "They remember what I was. You should be proud. You terrified an entire species." "No." Solara's voice was soft. "I am not proud. I was never proud. I just did not know any other way to be." Someone spoke through a loudspeaker. "Park Do-hyun, we know you are in there. We know you are harboring an enemy of humanity. Come out with your hands raised. This is your only warning." Do-hyun looked at Solara. She looked back at him. "Go," she said. "Surrender me. Save yourself. I don't want to save myself." "Then, what do you want?" Do-hyun thought about it. He thought about his great-grandmother, who had died in the camps. He thought about the genetic markers in his blood. He thought about 800 years of slavery and 300 years of freedom. He thought about the videos on Solara's data chip, the things humanity had done to win the war. He thought about what it meant to be human. "I want to ask them a question," he said. He walked to his desk and turned on his computer. His hands moved across the keyboard, faster than he had ever typed before. He was accessing the city's broadcast network. It was illegal. It would add years to his prison sentence. He did not care. "What are you doing?" Solara asked. "Something stupid?" The broadcast connected. Do-hyun's face appeared on every screen in Neo-Seoul. In homes, in offices, in the streets. Millions of people saw him. He took a deep breath and began to speak. "My name is Park Do-hyun. I am a nobody, a logistics coordinator, a person you would walk past on the street without noticing. But today, I need to tell you something. Today, I need to ask you a question." He paused. The security officers outside had stopped moving. They were watching his broadcast, just like everyone else. 300 years ago, we broke our chains. We fought a war against the dragons, and we won. We told ourselves that we were fighting for freedom, for justice, for the right to live as human beings instead of slaves. We told ourselves that we would be better than our masters, that we would build a civilization based on equality and kindness and hope. He took another breath. I have spent the last week learning the truth about how we won that war. I have seen the records that our leaders do not want us to see. I have learned that we created plagues that killed millions of dragon civilians. I have learned that we experimented on prisoners. I have learned that we burned worlds and slaughtered children. The street outside was silent now. Even the drones had stopped humming. I am not saying this to excuse what the dragons did to us. Nothing can excuse 800 years of slavery. Nothing can excuse the camps, the experiments, the billions of human lives that were treated like garbage. His voice cracked. He kept going. But I am standing here today because I found one of them. A dragon, one of the ones who ruled us. She has been living in our city for 200 years, starving herself to death, waiting for someone to kill her. She does not ask for forgiveness. She does not make excuses. She just carries the memory of everything she did, and she waits for it to end. He turned his computer screen so that the camera could see Solara lying on the floor. This is Solara, the celestial flame, one of the 7 dragons, the monster who built the lunar processing camps. My great-grandmother died because of her orders. Solara looked at the camera with her golden eyes. She did not speak. She did not move. I should hate her, Dahyun said. I do hate her. Part of me wants to watch her die screaming, the way my ancestors died. Part of me wants revenge. He stepped in front of the camera again. But another part of me keeps asking a question, and I need to ask it to all of you, because I cannot answer it alone. He spread his hands. What do we want to be? We are no longer slaves. We are no longer at war. We have won. We have the power now. So what do we do with that power? Do we kill every dragon we find? Do we celebrate their suffering? Do we teach our children to hate them forever? His voice grew stronger. Or do we prove that we are different from them? That we learn something from our suffering? That we can be better than the monsters who hurt us? Outside, he could hear voices. People shouting. He could not tell if they were agreeing with him or calling for his death. I am not asking you to forgive her. I am not asking you to forget what was done to us. I am asking you to decide what kind of species we want to be. Because right now, at this moment, we have a choice. And the choice we make will define us for the next 300 years. He turned off the broadcast. The silence lasted for about 10 seconds. Then his door exploded inward. Security officers poured into the apartment. They grabbed Do-hyun and threw him to the ground. They put restraints on his wrists. They pointed guns at Solara, screaming at her to not move. She did not move. She could not move. She was too weak. They dragged Do-hyun and Solara out of the apartment and into the street. The crowd that had gathered was massive. Thousands of people, watching, waiting. Some of them were holding signs that said death to dragons, but others were holding signs that said, what do we want to be? The security officers pushed Do-hyun and Solara into separate vehicles. Through the window, Do-hyun could see the crowd pressing against the barricades. He could hear them chanting, but he could not make out the words. He was taken to Terran security headquarters. They put him in a small room with a metal table and 2 chairs. Gina was waiting for him. That was incredibly stupid, she said. I know. You're going to prison for the rest of your life. I know. Gina sat down across from him. Her face was hard, but her eyes were troubled. Why did you do it? She asked. Why risk everything for a dragon? Do-hyun thought about his answer. Because that's not who I want to be, he said finally. I don't want to be someone who watches another creature starve to death and feels happy about it. Even if that creature is a monster. Even if that creature deserves it. He met her eyes. My great-grandmother spent her whole life in chains. She never got to choose who she wanted to be. But I can choose. And I choose to be something different. Gina stared at him for a long moment. The Terran Council is meeting, she said. They're watching the public response to your broadcast. People are divided. Good, Do-hyun said. That means they're thinking about it. They could execute both of you. They probably will. Do-hyun nodded. Then at least we made them think first. Gina stood up. She walked to the door. Then she stopped and turned back. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I think you might be the bravest person I've ever met. Or the stupidest. I haven't decided yet. She left. Do-hyun sat alone in the small room. He did not know what would happen next. He did not know if he would live or die. But for the first time in his life, he knew exactly who he was. And that was enough. It was held in the Grand Hall of Justice in Neo-Seoul, the largest courtroom ever built. Every seat was filled. Millions more watched on screens across Earth and the colonies. For the first time in 300 years, a dragon would answer for her crimes in front of the species she had once enslaved. And for the first time ever, humanity would be forced to answer to Sue. Lara sat in a special chair that had been built for her. She was stronger now. They had given her food and medical care, not out of kindness, but because they wanted her healthy enough to understand her punishment. Her golden eyes swept across the crowd, taking in every face. Do-hyun sat in the accused section beside her. His hands were still in restraints, but he could see everything. He could hear everything. On the first day, Solara testified. She spoke for 8 hours without stopping. She described every camp she had ordered built, every experiment she had approved, every execution she had witnessed. She named names. She gave dates. She held nothing back. The crowd listened in silence. Some people cried. Some people left, unable to hear any more. But most stayed and listened to every word. On the second day, the victims' families came forward. They confronted Solara one by one. They screamed at her. They cursed at her. They demanded to know why she had taken their grandparents, their great-grandparents, their ancestors. Solara answered every question. She did not defend herself. She did not ask for mercy. She simply told the truth. I did these things because I believed they were right, she said. I believed humans were lesser creatures who needed to be controlled. I was wrong. I have spent 200 years understanding how wrong I was. But understanding does not undo what I did. Nothing can. On the third day, something unexpected happened. A retired general named Han Sung-ho stood up from the audience. He was old, nearly 100 years old, one of the last surviving veterans of the Liberation War. He had been a hero. His face was on monuments. I need to say something, he said. The council allowed him to speak. General Han walked to the witness platform. He looked at Solara. Then he looked at the crowd. During the war, he said, I commanded the 7th Fleet. We were assigned to break the Dragon defensive line at the Procyon system. He paused. The fastest way to break that line was to destroy their civilian support, their supply ships, their medical stations, their refugee transports. The crowd grew very quiet. I gave the order, General Han continued. I destroyed 17 civilian ships, 30,000 dragons, families, children, non-combatants. His voice cracked. I told myself it was necessary. I told myself it was them or us. I told myself I had no choice. He looked at Solara. But I did have a choice. I just chose to do something evil because it was easier than finding another way. He turned back to the crowd. If we're going to put her on trial for war crimes, then we need to put ourselves on trial too. Because we did the same things she did. We just pretend we didn't. The hall exploded in noise. People shouted. People argued. The council called for order, but nobody listened. On the fourth day, more veterans came forward. Scientists who had worked on the bioweapons. Officers who had ordered attacks on civilian targets. Doctors who had experimented on dragon prisoners. They did not make excuses. They simply told the truth. The tribunal was no longer just about Solara. It had become something bigger. It had become a reckoning for all of humanity. On the fifth day, Do-hyun was called to speak. He stood before the council, his hands still bound. He looked at the cameras. He knew that billions of people were watching him. "I am not a hero," he said. "I am not a leader. I am just a man who found a dying monster in the street and couldn't stop thinking about what that meant." He paused. "I hated her. I still hate her. Part of me will always hate her. What she did to my family, to all of our families, was evil. Real evil. The kind that cannot be forgiven or forgotten." He turned to look at Solara. But when I looked at her, I saw something I didn't expect. I saw someone who remembered everything she had done, who carried that weight every single day, who wasn't asking for forgiveness, just for an ending. He turned back to the crowd, and I thought, is that what I want? Do I want to spend the rest of my life hating? Do I want my children to hate? Do I want to build a civilization based on revenge? His voice grew stronger. We won the war. We broke our chains. We are free. But what does that freedom mean if we use it to become everything we hated? What does it mean if we build our future on the bones of the past? He spread his hands as much as the restraints would allow. I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know if there is a right answer. But I know that we have to choose. Every day, we have to choose who we want to be. And I would rather choose something new than keep repeating the same old cycle of pain. He sat down. On the sixth day, the council deliberated. They argued for hours behind closed doors. The crowd waited. The whole world waited. On the seventh day, they announced their decision. The head of the council, an old woman named Baek Yoonji, stood before the assembly. After much debate, she said, "We have reached a verdict." The hall fell silent. Solara, formerly known as the Celestial Flame, is guilty of crimes against humanity. This is not in dispute. Her testimony and the historical record make her guilt absolutely clear. Solara nodded. She did not look surprised. However, Councilwoman Baek continued, "We have also heard testimony about crimes committed by humans during the Liberation War. Crimes that have been hidden for 3 centuries. Crimes that are no less evil than those committed by the Dominion." The crowd stirred. The council has decided that execution would be too easy. Death would end Solara's suffering, and we do not believe she has suffered enough. The old woman's voice was cold. But we also do not believe that more suffering is the answer. Suffering does not heal. It only creates more pain. She paused. Therefore, we sentence Solara to serve humanity for the remainder of her existence. She will travel to every world humanity has touched. She will testify to what the Dominion did and to what humanity did in return. She will ensure that no one forgets the truth. Not the comfortable truth. The real truth. The crowd erupted in noise again. Some people cheered. Some people booed. Some people wept. Councilwoman Baek raised her hand for silence. And Park Do-hyun is hereby pardoned of all charges. His actions, while illegal, have forced us to confront truths that we had buried for too long. This tribunal has shown us that we cannot build a better future by pretending the past did not happen. She looked at the cameras. Let this be the beginning of a new era. Not an era of forgiveness, we are not there yet, but an era of truth, an era of remembering, an era of choosing every day who we want to become. After the tribunal, Do-hyun found Solara in a holding room. She was sitting alone, looking out a window at the city she had once ruled. "How do you feel?" he asked. Solara considered the question. "I do not know. I expected to die. I thought I wanted to die." She turned to look at him. "But now, I am not sure. You have a long time ahead of you." "Yes, potentially thousands of years." She almost smiled. "That is a lot of testimony to give." Do-hyun sat down across from her. "Why do you think they did it? Why didn't they just kill you?" Solara was quiet for a long moment. "Because they wanted to prove something," she said finally. "To themselves. To the galaxy. To me." She met his eyes. "They wanted to prove that they were different from us. That they could choose another way. And you? What do you think?" Solara's golden eyes were softer now. Less ancient. More human. "I think," she said slowly, "that I have spent 10,000 years believing that power was the only thing that mattered. That the strong ruled and the weak served. That was the natural order. The only order." She reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were cold, but gentle. "And then I met a species that refused to accept that. A species that kept fighting even when they should have lost. A species that could do terrible things to survive, but also beautiful things to heal. A species that could hate me more than anything in the universe. And still choose not to kill me." She squeezed his hand. "Dragons ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, and we never learned anything. We never changed. We never grew." She smiled, and for the first time, the smile reached her eyes. "Humans have been free for 300 years, and you have already learned something we never could. What's that?" "That the chains you put on yourself are the hardest ones to break. But if you can break them." She looked out the window at the city, at the people, at the future that was just beginning. "If you can break them, you can be anything." Do-hyun stood up. Through the window, he could see the transport ship that would carry Solara to her first destination. The beginning of her new life. Her sentence taught her purpose. "Good luck," he said. Solara rose and walked toward the door. She paused and looked back at him. "You saved me," she said. "I still do not understand why." Do-hyun thought about his great-grandmother, about the camps, about the chains that had bound his family for generations, and about the choice he had made in that transit shelter, in the rain, standing over a dying monster. "Because that's what humans do," he said. "We break chains, even the ones we put on ourselves." Solara nodded slowly. Then she did something that no dragon had ever done before. She bowed to him. Not in submission, not in defeat. In respect. Then she walked out the door, toward the ship, toward her future, toward a galaxy